Great to be with my alumni. I think what I'm going to do is probably not take Catherine's desire to have the business case laid out, because I actually think the business case from a purely economic and market perspective is absolutely overwhelming, that LNG is both a viable and important potential, and I say potential, part of the future of BC's economy. And it's actually quite important for economic reasons. But I'll spend just a quick minute on that. I'll talk briefly. Jeff's outlined the fiscal imperative around it. And then I actually do want to spend most of my time taking Catherine on a little bit on what the environmental imperative around LNG is, because I think there's a pretty compelling case, and I hope to lay that out and get into a little bit of a discussion with it. Quickly on natural gas markets, and just to outline this for you to kind of outline why are we even looking at LNG. We've had, as Jeff outlined, we've had a long history of natural gas development in this province and in Western Canada. That marketplace for much of our history up until about 2008, 2009 was a continental marketplace, okay? So unlike other resource commodities that are traded globally, natural gas was traded in a continental marketplace. All this changed fundamentally with the shale gas revolution. We mostly hear about shale oil, at least in the American context, and how that's transforming our economy. Shale gas is transforming and has transformed our economic situation here vis-a-vis the other regional natural gas marketplaces that are out there. And what's happened is since 2009 with this massive explosion, and it literally is a revolution in the amount of supply and drilling and natural gas in the continental marketplace, we've got very, very low natural gas prices relative to historical norms and relative to other natural gas marketplaces. So what that means, if we go on a go-forward basis, these lower prices are projected to hold up in the continental marketplace, which means we're not going to get as much development of natural gas, our BC and Western Canadian natural gas resource. So what happens when marketplaces have an opportunity? That opportunity is opened up because, as Jeff outlined, in both Europe and in Asia, natural gas prices are much higher. It does cost a lot of money to liquefy and transport natural gas, but those price differentials between the marketplaces allow for a potential emergence of an LNG market. So that's the market imperative. It's why we've got 12 projects proposed for LNG development, 5 of which are by the super majors, so all of the major oil and gas companies are here looking at that. We do have a very robust and I think world-class upstream environment. We're very familiar with all the technologies that are involved in extracting natural gas. And I think the marketplace considerations, Catherine's, I think, outlined it. If the market's there and people are going to invest, let's make that, let's let them do that. I think from a fiscal and a British Columbian perspective, Jeff's got a great chart there on the fiscal, the royalty and revenue streams. I could outline a whole bunch more of the job numbers. But make no mistake, if we don't get into the export of natural gas into marketplaces that have higher prices, we are not going to be seeing the revenue stream that has historically come from natural gas, and that includes the jobs. We will see some downstream benefits in our marketplace from having those lower natural gas prices. There will be some substitution happening for oil products that are trading at a much higher level, but it won't be in a significant scale. Now I'm going to cut right to where I think we should have a really rigorous discussion on, and that's the environmental imperative around LNG development. And Catherine said she hasn't taken a look at some of the scenarios and where things are going with energy development looking out. The good news is there's a lot of data out there on this. I'm going to outline a couple visions of the future that are pretty well established, I would argue, by a very, very credible organization, International Energy Agency, which does, I think, the best modeling in the world, very unbiased modeling. Any scenario that they put forward going forward, and this includes scenarios that have very, very heavy government regulation and pricing of carbon, all of those scenarios show a massive increase, a necessary increase in the use of natural gas. And it is simple. I'm going to cut right to the chase. We simply have to bend the consumption of coal curve that is predicted in the developing world if we're going to come anywhere close to meeting our climate change targets. It's why all those scenarios outline it. It's why it's fundamental to meeting the targets. You can't substitute, unfortunately, on mass scale over the next 2 decades, renewables to meet that demand in where the demand is coming from. 80% of the natural gas demand on the go-forward basis is going to be coming from Asia. That's just the reality of the numbers. I don't know anybody who is arguing that those numbers are false. So we need to have gas to bend the coal curve. I think the conversation then comes, and I've got some time for Catherine's concerns and our need for more life cycle analysis and the kind of things that look a little bit more intensively about what LNG specifically means for BC. But here's why I'm a lot more optimistic than Catherine is about our resource in a global context. Over 50% of the natural gas reserves in the world are held in 4 countries: Iran, Russia, Turkmenistan, and Qatar. And I don't know anybody who thinks that the regulatory regimes and the regimes that they have around carbon pricing in those 4 regimes come even remotely close to what we have here in BC. We've got a carbon price here in BC. I agree we should have a robust discussion on how to use that money and what we could do with that in a much more effective way. But I would argue that our resource, our regulatory regimes, the things that we can do and should do to be leaders, and I'm quite proud to say that I was heavily involved in Premier Campbell's climate change plans just before I left office. I'd put that up against anything around the world. And I think we should be the market leaders. I think we can do LNG development better than anybody else, or close to better than anybody else. And I think we should be having a much more rigorous discussion, though, about that. But what I think we should avoid doing is naively thinking that if we can just shut down the LNG industry here in BC, that somehow we're going to get a global benefit from a GHG perspective. I fundamentally reject that. I've yet to see anything that even remotely makes a case for that. Catherine, the substitution effect, this conversation that you outlined, is natural gas going to substitute for renewables in these marketplaces? There's nobody making that argument. Nobody. That empirically I've read that's making that argument. So with that, I'd enjoy some questions and conversation and debate. And thanks again, Shauna. It's always good to be involved in